Hello, Mark here from Cosmic Audio, and I just wanted to do a really quick video on recording drums. Now recently we did a video shoot in the studio for the BB Blues Band. We had very little time to set up. The band arrived about 9-10 o'clock and the drummer had to be away by 3, so we had a very limited time span and they wanted to get 4 songs done. So it was literally a case of throw some microphones up, get the cameras set up, hit record, get them playing, packed down, gone. A very, very speedy session, which reinforced what I've always thought, which is the 3 main things, the 3 most important things in getting a really good drum sound. Now, important thing number 1, and I think it's the most important thing out of everything else, and that is have a really good drummer. If you're recording a really good drummer, then you're 90% of the way there. They can be using a crappy old kit, you can use rubbish microphones, it doesn't really matter. If you've got a great drummer, you can literally mic the drum kit up with anything and the drummer will make the drum sound good, the microphones will capture that. And obviously if you're doing an album, you want to put a bit more thought into it than that, and you want to try different snares and different tunings and get everything set up to suit the record. But if you're in a rush or if you're just starting out, the most important thing you need to know is that to get a good drum sound, you need, number 1, a good drummer. Number 2, a good drum kit helps and some lovely sounding cymbals. And number 3, the third most important thing, is the room that you record it in. If you've got a really echoey, horrible sounding room, the mics are going to capture that. There's ways around it. You can make sure you use cardioid dynamics, close mic the drums and concentrate on the close mic sound and try not to get so much of the room. But if you've got a horrible sounding room, you're probably going to get a horrible sounding drum recording. So let's have a look at what we did. We had very, very few mics on the kit. We had a mic in the kick drum, which was a AKG D112. Budget classic. We had a microphone on the outside of the kick drum, which is this one. Now this is actually a really cheap MXL microphone, but I'd like a little bit of DIY electronics and stuff like that, so I replaced the grill with a much better quality grill, replaced the capsule with an RK47, which is basically a U47 capsule, and replaced the electronics in the microphone as well for clone U47 electronics. So this is a great sounding mic on anything that produces low end, bass drum, bass amplifiers, male vocals. This is a great sounding mic, and a fraction of the cost of a genuine U47, which could be, you know, £15,000 these days. Does it sound like a U47? Well, all U47s have aged differently and they all sound different now, so yeah, it probably does. I'm going to tell myself that anyway. So that was on the bass drum. For overheads, we used a pair of these. Now these are really cheap condenser microphones from Thomann. They're their own brand, and I think they were £90 for a matched pair, including a case, which is insane. Long live China. And they just sound great. I've used KM84s, all kinds of things over the years, and these sound as good as anything. Often we'll use a large diaphragm condenser as overheads instead of a small diaphragm condenser. Pros and cons for me are the large diaphragm condenser, you tend to get a fuller drum sound, whereas with a small diaphragm condenser you tend to get more detail in the cymbals. Also the pickup pattern on these is a little bit tighter than it is on our large diaphragm mics. They're quite cardioid, and we were recording a band live in the room with no headphones, vocals coming through monitors, so there was quite a bit of spill in the room, and I chose these mainly to pick up detail on the cymbals, but also to cut down on a little bit of spill. So I'm going to play some of the recording in a minute. You'll hear some of the spill come through in the mics. It was at a level that if the guitarist needed to redo a solo, then we could have overdubbed the solo and it would have been fine. But so those for overheads. We used on the snare, becoming a classic these days, the Audix i5. Also use SM57s on snares as well. These tend to be a little bit brighter, need a little bit less processing after the event. Just a great mic for snare, great mic for guitar cabs, great mics to put on a Leslie. I've used them on vocals. They're just a great all-round microphone. Anywhere where you'd use an SM57 or an SM58, you can use one of these and they'll sound great. You can use them on horns, you can just use them on anything. Brilliant microphones. The whole Audix range is really good. Then for toms, normally on toms, if we're doing a proper album recording, I'd use large diaphragm condensers or dynamics, depending on what kind of sound we're after. In this case, because we were videoing the band, we wanted to be as unobtrusive as possible, so I just used these clip-on mics, which again were from a very cheap Chinese-made drum kit. You can clip them on the ring, they get nice and close to the head, and they just sound great for toms. I gated the toms, and they just gave us a nice smacky, punchy, warm, dynamic sound. So those were great. So those are the mics we used on the kit. Let's play a bit of the track, and let's just bring everything up for the moment, just roughly, just so you can hear what's going on. So that's just a very rough balance, and then we'll go through each microphone and just listen to each one in isolation. So that's just a very rough mix of the drums. So the main thing with this recording, as I said earlier, is that you get a good drummer. The drummer was Roger Batting, who's a very well-respected drum teacher from just outside of Cambridge. He's worked on all sorts of things. He's worked with Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics. He's worked on American Idol. He's a well-known drummer. Lovely guy, and just brilliant behind a kit. He's got a great drum face, put loads of energy into it, and that's one of the most important things. He really gives a performance, and you want to capture that performance. Doesn't matter what you capture it with or how you capture it, just capture it. That's the main thing. So let's have a listen to some of the mics in isolation. So this is the D112 on the bass drum. So we're getting quite a bit of click from that. It's capturing some nice low end, but it's also capturing the beta head hitting that bass drum skin really well. This one we had on the outside. Now there was quite a bit of spill from this one, so I've basically EQ'd a lot of the top end out, and it's just giving us some real warm kind of low end. You'll need headphones on or to be listening with a decent pair of speakers to hear that. It'll probably just sound awful if you're listening on your phone. So the two blended work quite well. The 112 gives us lots of kick, click. The 47 clone gives us lots of nice low end depth. Let's just take the overheads out for a second, and you can hear that in isolation. Now I have gated the drums on this. Sometimes, don't always gate drums, depends what we're working on. Sometimes I'll gate them, sometimes I won't. In this case I have. Let's have a listen to the snare. So this is the Audix i5 on the snare. Let's just skip back a bit in the track. So that with our bass drum. Okay, let's bring in the overheads. Last but not least, our tom mics. So that's it, 7 mics on the drum kit. Not particularly expensive microphones at all, but Roger was given a great performance. His kit sounded great, the room sounds great. That's your 3 most critical steps taken care of. So let's have a little quick look at what we did in post-production, so what we did in terms of mixing. Now on this I've used entirely Slate digital plugins because I love the Slate bundle. It's fantastic. I'm used to, I grew up on analog desks, and for me it's like using an analog desk. Everything's where I expect it to be, and most important of all is that the plugins just sound absolutely fantastic. So we did a very quick mix on this for this video, and I've just started off with some of the presets that Slate give you and just added a couple of bits and tweaked as we've gone along. So you can see we've got a gate on the kick drum there. EQ wise, I've got EQ going into compression, so a Neve style EQ going into a compressor, and then a little bit more EQ to undo what the compressor's done to the initial EQ. We've got quite a hefty boost at about 3.5k to bring out some of that click of the front head of the kick, and a slight boost at 58 hertz, so around 60 hertz. So a slight boost at 60 hertz, and a bigger boost at about 3.5 to bring that click out, bring the top end of the kick out. And then I've kind of mirrored that pretty much on the SSL black EQ. We've got a boost at around 55 Hertz. I've boosted 4.5 a little bit, again to bring out a bit more of that click after the compressor's done its thing. Compressor's working quite hard on that, as you can see. And then we've just got the thickness on the Revival plugin from Slate, which is a great plugin. Let's just go back again. In fact, let me just stick it on loop and then it'll keep going round on it. So let's go back to the beginning. So on the microphone on the outside of the kick, I've done absolutely nothing. Just left it as it is. There we go. On the snare, what have we got on the snare? So I've started again with one of the snare presets because it gives you a good starting point. It loads the EQ I always want, it loads the compressor I always want, and it gets me roughly in the ballpark for a snare sound. Again, I've added the gate into the chain, so the gate is the first thing that's going on there, and I'm just gonna, let's just take some of the other stuff out and we'll just bypass everything so you can hear what it's doing. So without the gate, you can hear there's quite a bit of hi-hat spill there, so that's with the gate in. And then EQ wise, I've got a boost at 3.2 kilohertz. I've got a slight boost at just under 100 hertz on the low end, just to bring some of that nice warm low end out of the snare. Let's bypass the EQ. It just sounds a bit duller, a bit lifeless. EQ back in, it brings out the snap, it brings out the body. Compressor's hardly doing anything. It's taking about a dB off at the top, so I'm not really compressing the snare at all. And we've got a bit of the shimmer and a bit of the thickness on the Slate plugin. That's that. Let's bring everything else back in again. So moving on, overheads I've done nothing at all to, and then floor tom and rack tom. Again, started with one of the presets from Slate because it just gives you a great foundation to work with. Very heavy gating on the toms because there was quite a bit of ugly bleed from the tom mics and I wanted to get rid of that, so it just literally picks up the floor tom and the rack tom when he hits them. Let's just find a bit of tom. There's some coming up at the end, so I'll just solo those and you can just hear what the toms sound like on their own. Bring the snare as well. So quite heavily gated, almost artificially so, but when you bring everything back in together with the overheads, you don't hear the gates anymore. All you hear is a lot more punch, a lot more clarity, a lot less spill. So very minimal processing on the drum kit, really, just basic EQ, basic compression, gating on most of the dynamic mics. And that's it, blended in with the overheads, it sounds great. Again, that's down to Roger, that's not down to anything we've done. If you get a good drummer on a good kit in a good room, you can literally mic them up with anything, and as long as you're not doing something horrendous like getting microphones the wrong way round or something like that, you really can't go wrong. That's my biggest tip for anyone starting out recording drums is good drummer, good drum kit, good room.